Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Red and White Authority, episode number 5. I'm Art Regner, along with Kevin Allen, and we are talking about the Detroit Red Wings as usual. And Kevin, always great to see you as always. And last night, Red Wings lose to the Columbus Blue Jackets by a score of 3-1. They now have a road trip, which is daunting to say the least. Back-to-back games in the state of Pennsylvania coming up this weekend. Saturday afternoon against the Philadelphia Flyers, and then Sunday afternoon, early noon start against the Pittsburgh Penguins. 3 days off, and then they hit the state of Florida, where they play, I believe it's the Florida Panthers first in Miami, and then the Tampa Bay Lightning on Friday. So that's Thursday and Friday. Day off a week from tomorrow. And then Sunday afternoon, a matinee affair against the St. Louis Blues at home. So people are starting to worry a little bit because the Red Wings are slumping maybe at the worst time possible, because it seems everybody else around them is winning in the standings in the Atlantic Division, and if they're not winning, they're at least getting a point playing a lot of three-point games. Your thoughts as the Red Wings embark on this really crucial weekend road swing?
Well, I'm sure that was a very distressing loss for General Manager Ken Holland and Coach Mike Babcock. I think most of us have learned to trust Mike Babcock's analysis of his team. And he said earlier in the week that just talked about how difficult it is to maintain that emotional high that you need in order to be consistent. And, you know, even great teams have trouble doing that. All that being said, you know, you have to beat the Columbus Blue Jackets the way they've performed this season. And, you know, all of a sudden, after what was a really good road trip, now you're starting to wonder, okay, well, you know, the Red Wings are struggling. And they're struggling at a time when the Boston Bruins beneath them seem to have discovered their game a little bit and are finding a way to maybe strengthen their playoff position. And it feels like the Red Wings are slipping away from contending for, you know, the division title. And, you know, to me, I think most of us have started to view the Red Wings as being a completely different team than last year's team. Like last season's team, I think it was enough just to make the playoffs, but the Red Wings had played well enough early on that they looked like a real serious contender. So I think if you're a Red Wing fan and you see what's happening with the team over the last 4 games, you're alarmed. I mean, and it's been a team-wide slump. I know, you know, a lot of the fans are blaming Jimmy Howard, and, you know, he has not been at his best. There's no doubt about that. But it really has, you know, what Red Wing at this point is playing his best hockey right now? I don't think there are that many players. And I think, just as you pointed out, you want to be at least on an uptick late in the season. I mean, that's, you know, you look around the league, that's the way the LA Kings are successful. They don't even worry until it seems like March, and then suddenly they're rocking and rolling, and then they're a contender. I just mentioned the Bruins have now picked it up a little bit as well. So it's going to be interesting. I think this actually might be the best time for a road trip for the Red Wings, because sometimes when you get on the road, as we often talk about, you know, the team kind of comes together. There's you know, there's more time to talk about hockey. There's no distractions, and you get in there. It's really, a road trip is really just all about hockey. So maybe this is the right time for the Red Wings to go on the road and sort of, you know, remember again what it was that made them successful for the vast majority of the season.
The way the Red Wings played that puck possession was not the East style, and it seems that the Red Wings are now trying to get into an Eastern style mode and having maybe more of a difficult adjustment. Kevin, you're back with us. You froze up there, so I'm not sure if I can see you. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Now I don't know where we left off. We faded off there for a short period of time, but
well, you know, just like I'm here at the radio station today, so it's like doing live radio. I guess my point, alluding to what you said, there was a perception when the Red Wings joined the East that they would be a dominant force. And then obviously, as you said, last year they had to kind of struggle maybe finding their way in the Eastern Conference, and injuries obviously plagued the team last year. This year, even though they have a great record against the Western Conference, it seems that now that they're playing against Eastern-heavy teams, and I know they, they lost to Calgary, I understand that, and Edmonton they beat. But if you look at this schedule now, I mean, they're playing a few Western Conference teams, but they're really going into the meat against Atlantic Division foes. And do you think that they're slumping, but is it still trying to get used to the conference that they're in when we were all under the assumption that it would be an easy transition for them?
Yeah, well, often the case when teams go into a slump is it's always difficult to figure out why that's happening. I mean, let's look at last season when the St. Louis Blues were a very consistent team, and then late in the season they had a few injuries. But even after the guys started to come back, there was really no explanation. They sort of lost their confidence. So, I think there is an adjustment to the Eastern Conference to be sure, but I'm not sure that's what this is about. This just seems to be, everybody going south at the same time. It's almost as if they've let down after a very successful road trip. They were playing a pretty high caliber hockey when they were on that road trip, and actually had probably exceeded expectations on their road trip. And then have since have come back, have not been sharp. But I almost think when they get, especially when they get to Florida and they play against the Lightning, I almost feel, and players, they cringe when people bring up statement games. But I think they do need to make a statement against the Tampa Bay Lightning. If they want to be thought of as a contender, I think they need to go in the next week and perform on the big stage. I mean, they need to beat the Penguins. They need to beat the Lightning. Those are two, premium teams, and they need to, on this road trip, to come back from those two games in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Florida. I think they need to win 3 of those games, just to sort of get back on track and show again that they're, the type of team. Now, I believe they have the kind of team that in the playoffs they could beat Montreal or Tampa Bay. I mean, I think it's possible. I think both Montreal and Tampa Bay have played better than the Red Wings this season, as their record would attest, but I think they're capable of beating those teams.
Yeah, I thought coming out of the room yesterday, Henrik Zetterberg said, well, we got chances. We had 40 shots on net, but we have to bury our opportunities when we get good quality scoring chances. And he kept saying we're one and done, meaning they get a shot on goal, but that's it. There's nobody fighting for a rebound. Goalie doesn't give up a rebound. The defensemen are clearing the puck out before the Red Wings could get to maybe a rebound. And I find myself, and I think a lot of Red Wing fans do, when they see them, they always want the pretty player, the drop pass, and I know that cost Stephen White dearly against Boston over the past weekend, but I always find myself saying, shoot the puck, shoot. I can remember at Joe Louis Arena fans chanting shoot the puck, but then you talk to Mike Babcock, and he says, listen, I know our power play was 1 of 6, but we're, it's the #1 power play. I think we're doing a lot of good things, but we're not all on the same page. And if we're not all on the same page, then we play a slow type of game. Chris Osgood alluded to the fact that he thought that perhaps, the Red Wings are not trusting their teammate. Everyone's a little bit pressing now, so if you don't trust your teammate, you're trying to do his job, which pretty much throws you off on the job that you're trying to do. And then you had Jimmy Howard say, listen, I think this doldrum stuff is a bunch of hooey. We're a young enough team now where we should be energized and excited to play. We shouldn't have a doldrum. So I guess what I'm trying to say is when you have a slump, everybody seems to have a theory, but nobody really seems to have an answer of how to get out of it.
Yeah, I listened to that last night, and it'd be interesting to get your take on this, but it didn't feel like a 40-shot game to me.
No.
In the third period, they had control of the puck, but it never felt like they were as dangerous as they have been previously. When the Red Wings get rocking and rolling now with Tatar and Nyquist and Datsuk and Zetterberg, everybody playing at a high level, they look very, very dangerous. They didn't look all that dangerous to me last night. I thought their offensive difficulties really started on the defensive end, and that's sort of how it's been in the since the slump began. They're not getting out of their zone as quickly. They're not getting out as crisply. It seems like there's more turnovers. The first passes aren't good. They don't have the same level of speed in the neutral zone. Occasionally they do, but not at the same consistent level as they did earlier in the season. It just seems like everybody's off a little bit, and again, I think that comes down to confidence, and it doesn't help. that Jimmy Howard, had that groin injury, and really is, the groin injuries are the worst for goalies, as everyone knows. And I think coming back from that, the confidence wanes in that as well. Do you trust that groin? But a lot of people are blaming Jimmy Howard today, and he was not, in my opinion, as sharp as I've seen him. And he bears some responsibility. Bobrovsky played well enough in that game to win, and Howard didn't really give his team as much of a chance as he could have. I don't know that I blame him for the goals, but Harry Sinden used to tell me that he was always bothered when his coach says, "Well, you can't blame the goalie." He says, "Well, of course you can. That we don't pay him to make the easy saves; we pay him to make the hard saves."
Right.
I think all of that is plays into it. But the bottom line is this: the Red Wings only got one goal against the Columbus Blue Jackets, and you got to do better than that. They're capable of that, and if they're playing at their best, then Howard is more confident. If Howard's at his best, then the offense is more confident. But I really felt that last night. I didn't think the defense looked sharp, and I thought the offensive problem started on the back end and just getting the puck out of the zone, crisply. I mean, sometimes they'd get it out, but it wasn't the same way as when earlier in the year when suddenly there was that first pass out of the zone and they were crossing the blue line in a second and a half. We didn't see that last night.
No, and I think it's what was being brought up today, and I hosted a morning radio show here in Detroit today. Fans are kind of concerned about the Red Wings 5-on-5 play. Specialty teams, even though they were 1 of 6 on the power play, Mike Babcock said, "I'm not worried really about our power play. You're gonna have nights like that where you're 1 of 6, but they have given up a power play goal, I think at least one in their last 8 games, which isn't good. But 5-on-5, I think goal differential they're a +6, which isn't great. Especially for a team like the Red Wings. At one time, I can remember them being, like +45 or something like that. But, I'm not pining for the old days. 5-on-5 play, we know specialty teams in the playoffs are crucial. You've got to convert on your power plays. You've got to kill penalties. But are we seeing a team that has built an impressive record thus far, 85 points, based on being a good specialty team play and not such a good 5-on-5 team?
Well, for sure they have. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that because, their power play has been so good, and they've been living on that. They've been feasting on the power play. They've had a lot of multiple power play goal games, it's never a. It's not that the power play is a gimmick because it's an essential part of playing hockey, but I think you ask any coach in the league, do you rather be a good 5-on-5 team or a good power play team? He's going to say, 5-on-5, because even though sometimes games seems like dueling power play, we play most of the game at 5-on-5. The Red Wings, have not been as effective as some of the top teams in the league, and that will certainly haunt you in the postseason, where it's very difficult to score goals, period, but you tend not to see as many power plays. In the old days, it was because the referees would swallow the whistle, and I think now it's more about that teams are so reluctant to take penalties that players are very careful. And in tight games, as we all know in the playoffs, in the second and third period, when it's tied, suddenly there's just not as many scoring chances. And if you're not a good 5-on-5 team, you're not going to win those games.
No, and I watched. I don't know if you saw the post-game show, but they had the Columbus coach on, and they said, "Well, were you worried? They scored that early power play goal," and he said, "No, because I like the way we were playing 5-on-5." And he must have alluded to that 3 or 4 times during the course of a 2-minute interview that, hey, they're going to get their power play opportunities, and I thought we were good on our penalty kill, but overall, from the beginning of the game, I liked the way we were playing 5-on-5. I felt pretty confident. I felt good about my team, and and in a strange sense, it seems like right now when with the Red Wings are kind of searching for something, and I don't know if it's energy or getting better. Mike Babcock is almost apologetic when he says, "Listen, we brought 2 pretty good hockey players in here, and we haven't played well. They've played well, and I feel bad. It's kind of our slump has kind of coincided with the acquisition of Ziglisky and Cole, But then again, as we talked about today on the air, maybe it's Darren Helm. Is that
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
the linchpin here?
Well, that's a great thought. I mean, because it really coincides with the slump. He was injured in the Nashville game. I think that's right.
Hmm.
And they have not been the same since. Well, just going back to 5-on-5 for a minute. At the start of this season, I talked to David Poyle, who's been the general manager of the Nashville Predators since their inception. Of course, has been a general manager dating back to the 1980s when he was with the Washington Capitals first. And we were talking about his decision to remove Barry Trotz, who's one of the most respected coaches in the game. And he wouldn't say specifically anything about Barry Trotz, but he did talk about what concerned him most about his team. And what concerned him most about his team was it's 5-on-5 play. Just last year he just said, our goal differential 5-on-5 was the lowest, that I can remember. And he said, you can't be successful. Well, he made that change, and Peter Laviolette, he brought in Peter Laviolette, who was an offensive coach, and their 5-on-5 play this season has improved dramatically. Now, lately they've slumped and it's dipped a little bit, but I think again that just demonstrates, how coaches and GMs look at 5-on-5 play. But with regard to Helm, I don't think there's any question that Helm is a catalyst on this team, and we've spoken about this before. But it's the threat of Helm is almost as significant as his production, because when he's on that team, it seems like the team, he sets the cadence. He's the drum beat, and when he's flying around the ice, the rest of the players seem to fly around the ice. And he doesn't seem to get a breakaway, every game. It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not by much. And he creates havoc with the opposition. He changes the way they defend. It's interesting, but we finally saw this season what it means to have the full Darren Helm, and now that he's missing, they really do seem to be missing something.
Yeah, it is kind of odd. I mean, Datsuk doesn't seem to be the same player, and I didn't think I would say that about him. But Pavel kind of, I'm not going to say floats in and out, because that would be like it's a put down. But he's a little bit streaky. I mean, he's usually more on a good streak than he is on a bad streak, but lately he's kind of been filtering in and out of the ice, although Zetterberg's now picked up the slack. I think that Henrik Zetterberg, who, the Energizer Bunny of NHL players, I mean, he definitely is just all over the ice. But I guess my main concern when I look at this again, Yurko hasn't scored forever. I know we've talked about him. He seems to be pressing, but Nyquist and Tatar, two guys that you're really counting on right now, just aren't having much puck luck. They seem to be around the net. They seem to be making all the moves that they've made. They seem to be getting some open shots, but the puck's just not going in.
Yeah, and they have to score. I mean, this is the new generation of Red Wings, and they have to be Datsuk and Zetterberg. When this team was going well, the old Red Wings, it was Datsuk and Zetterberg leading the way. Well, this new Red Wings team, they need Tatar and Nyquist to be much more consistent. They can't have those prolonged periods of being without goals. I mean, again, I think this is just part of what I said earlier, which is, this is a team-wide slump, even though people want to make it about Howard. I think very few players are going real well right now for the Red Wings, and I would stop short of saying it's alarming. I mean, the Nashville Predators have been one of the league's most consistent teams, and they're in the midst of trying to play their way out of and getting back to where they were before. The Montreal Canadiens went through it as well. So, these things are going to happen. But I think when I watched that game last night, I think you could accept what had been happening up until that point. But, Columbus is out of it. They've been overrun by injuries, and Columbus looked like the better team. Richard said, their coach, as you mentioned about their 5-on-5 play, well, that was evident when you were watching. I mean, it seemed like Columbus was the better team yesterday when you watched. As I said, I didn't really even accept that it was really a 40-shot game. It didn't feel like that to me. It didn't feel like the Red Wings were playing all that dangerous. And it really looked like the Blue Jackets expected to win that game. And the Red Wings were, kind of scrambling.
Well, I know that in their last, I believe now 5 games at Joe Louis Arena, Columbus is 4-1,
Yeah.
and in their last 12 games against Detroit, they're 9-2-1. And I had Jack Johnson on the air yesterday, and I asked him about it, and he kind of laughed and said, "Well, sometimes it's just a law of averages." He says, "But a lot of it is matchups, and we feel that we match up well against the Red Wings," and that was pretty apparent last night because I agree with you lately when I've watched the Red Wings, but it was really apparent in last night's game. I just didn't feel that the Red Wings, it was kind of like watching them against Calgary, where even though they took a quick lead, it seemed like the better team was playing from behind and was eventually going to catch up and win the game. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the feeling I had last night. But how do they turn it around, Kevin? I know that Mickey Redmond kept alluding to it, and then Ozzy did too. Well, they were saying, well, eventually they're going to catch fire and they're going to turn around, and they're not even going to look like the same team. Yet, when I heard the Red Wings and what was emanating from the room, they're searching for answers, I guess, to try to catch that fire. I mean, does it just sort of happen? Does it just sort of turn around? Team dynamic. I know you said it isn't alarming, but I guess what do you do except continue playing and working hard and just hopefully that your fortunes turn around, or is there something specific? And maybe you've hit it on the head, is where they have to be better on the penalty kill, and their defense has to
Yeah.
pick it up.
Well, that's what I would say. I would turn back the clock to the beginning of October when there were a lot of questions about how good the Red Wings were going to be defensively. They didn't get the big name defenseman they wanted to get. And what happened? The Red Wings came out and were fully committed to being a better defensive team. I mean, we all remember how that was in October. I mean,
Right.
they just were not giving up scoring chances. They tightened down the screws on the defense. Everybody was playing with an emphasis on keeping the puck out of their zone and out of their net, and from there, offense was created because when you're very sound defensively, as the Red Wings were, you're getting the puck out of your zone quickly. You're making the smart first passes, and that's to me, what's different is this team is not as sharp, defensively, and I think it's hurt their offense as well. So that Mike Babcock obviously knows more about it than you and I do, but I would say Mike Babcock is probably saying, okay, let's go back to the basics here, because that's when this team was really good. When they were playing a very simple get the puck out of their zone and get it up to the forwards defense, it was a real effective. And it almost seems like the more they start to believe they're an offensive team, the worse they play. I think they really do have to. Concentrate on, because I think they have to work at being good defensively. I mean, they don't have the dominant defensive players. Let's just compare the New York Rangers, for example, where they've got Mark Stahl and Girardi and Ryan McDonough and Kevin Kline, and though he's injured, and Keith Yandel. I mean, those are some skillful players. I mean, those are McDonough is an Olympian. Yandel almost made the Olympics. Girardi's considered one of the best stay-at-home defenseman. Mark Stahl's a $5.5 million defenseman. The Red Wings don't have that level of skill. They've got a bunch of guys who have to work hard. So I think they have to think about it and work at it to be really good defensively. They can't. Herb Brooks was famous saying, "We're not talented enough to win by talent alone." Well, I think the Red Wings defense is not talented enough to win by talent alone. Like, they really have to be solid and work hard in order to make it work. And I think if they did that, then I think it would help the offense. I think if they could just concentrate on getting the puck out of the zone, then I think guys like Tatar and Nyquist and Zetterberg and Datsuk would be probably more effective players.
Kevin, I swore I wasn't going to mention this player's name in this podcast because we've talked about it in the last couple, but you've piqued my interest. Is that why a guy like Dion Phaneuf is somebody that the Red Wings, even though they have a lot of young prospects that they're very, very high on, is that why they're looking at somebody who can come in here and I'm not saying Dion Phaneuf's a great defender per se, but bring him in here, make him on the second pairing, and let him just be a cantankerous physical force and concentrate. And, I know he has a great shot and all that kind of stuff. Put it on the power play. But is that why they're looking for some sort of veteran presence like a Dion Phaneuf. I mean, is that why this thing, first of all, won't go away? And is that really what they need? I mean, somebody who, you know, I think at this point, especially what happened in Toronto, I know when he was in Calgary, all the Canadian press loved him, and he was the second coming of, you know, Bobby Orr or something. You know, he was going to be great. That kind of hasn't really turned out for him, but I really think he's, you know, he's really taken a hit reputation-wise being in Toronto. So I think that, you know, he's some player in between the great savior player he was supposedly in Calgary and what's going on in Toronto. Is that why Detroit still seems to have interest in him?
Well, I mean, I think their interest in Dion Phaneuf is really just their interest in upgrading the defense. Like I don't know that like they feel Dion Phaneuf would be the answer that would suddenly transform this defense into you know one of the top defenses in the league. But I think you know he was available at the time. And they, you know, they would like to make this defense better, you know, just for the reasons that I just sort of mentioned. I mean,
right.
You need to upgrade. So, you know, I think again, I said this last time, it's true. I think a lot of what's going to happen with Dion Phaneuf or someone else, you know, Mike Green is still going to be available next summer. There'll be other players that are available as well in the marketplace. And what the Red Wings do, I think, is heavily dependent on what happens in the postseason. Like, you know, when you look at that defense, if you looked at that defense at the start of the season, you would say, hey, you know, maybe we can make this work with a no-name defense. You know, the New Jersey Devils got all the way to the Stanley Cup final with a defense, in my opinion, that isn't as good as the Red Wings defense is now. Right. You know, but they made it to the finals with it. But it didn't serve them well over the long period. You know, they haven't been the same team without it. So, or the same team since then. But you know, I think the Red Wings will be looking to upgrade their defense, and it'll depend on who's available in the off season. You know, I think Phaneuf is a possibility, but we also have to factor in. You know, DeKaiser will be better next season. You know, just because he's had another full season here. You would expect Brendan Smith to be better, but you know, is Brendan Smith ever going to be the player they thought he was going to be? I don't know. I mean, to me, he's been improved this season, but you know, could you find a player who could help more than Brendan Smith? Well, probably yes. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But I know what your point is on Dion Phaneuf. You know, I think if you're looking to upgrade the skill level, you can convince yourself is okay. You know, Phaneuf has some qualities that the Red Wings are lacking. You know, right. He is that mean, very passionate player. They have some passionate players, but you know, he's got passion at another level. He can boil over, and you know, and players that are boil over can sometimes hurt your team, but also they can help your team as well because you know there's a danger level that everyone has to keep their head up around. You know, Dion Phaneuf, and I think there is also a thought process that Phaneuf would be a better player in Detroit because he would not have to do as much. He would not be the big fish here.
Well, how many times have we seen the Red Wings acquire a player? Not so much. You know, I know that the Toronto people like to say, well, it'd be like Larry Murphy coming to Detroit again if Phaneuf were to come here. But kind of a reclamation project where they do come and they seem to find a second win. I mean, I can list off a lot of different players. I mean, Chris Chelios talks about, and you're very well aware of this. I mean, coming to the Red Wings is the best thing ever happened to him. I don't think anybody thought he'd last 9 seasons here when he came here, but you know, he was able to adapt to a system. It wasn't, you know, he didn't have to be Captain Chicago here in Detroit. And then if you look at, you know, look at a guy like, although I know he's still on the team, hasn't played much, but Daniel Cleary was on a tryout contract and did have some productive years for Detroit and learned how to play the game. So it has happened here, and I do think the mindset of the club, if you bring in a player like, you know, let's say Phaneuf, I think it would have a positive outlook on him because, Kevin, you know this as well as I do, and maybe even more so, the Red Wings have a great reputation, not only of being a well-run franchise, but the way they treat their players. And, and they want to play here. Yeah,
no, that's absolutely for sure. I mean, that's why it's been a little bit shocking, I think, for the organization that they haven't been, you know, their recruiting's been a little off.
Right.
You know, going back to Ryan Suter. But, you know, the Suter situation was special circumstances. Suter's wife was from Minnesota. She really wanted to go there. And I think if there was no Minnesota, I think Ryan Suter would have been a Red Wing. I think that was just a perfect fit for him. Zach Parise and he were very close. His wife was from Minnesota. It was closer to Wisconsin, his home. There were just a lot of factors that led into that. And then last season, they weren't able to land any of the big guys, in particular Niskanen, and Boyle turned them down. And I think fans sort of got the wrong impression that players didn't want to come here. Well, I think that was true, but it wasn't for the reason that people thought. Like, I think it was just strictly about the fact that the Red Wings were a difficult read. Like, you didn't know which direction this team was going. Like, they barely got in the playoffs. They lost in 5 games. Is this team going to be good enough this season? Where was Datsuk and Zetterberg going to be? I think people were, like Niskanen thought that the Washington Capitals they were a better roll of the dice. Barry Trotz was going there. They were going to add his friend Brooks Orpik. They had Ovechkin. They had just had a lot more factors. He was accustomed to playing against them. He knew the guys on that team. So I think it was special circumstances, and I think they'll be able to recruit again because of the way this team has performed this season. It'll be interesting to see, though, what happens whether if Babcock leaves, how that will impact their recruiting.
Well, you're reading my mind here. How much of an impact does Babcock staying or leaving have on this team? Because you get mixed reviews. You hear that there's players just praying that Mike Babcock doesn't come back to Detroit that are on the current Detroit roster, and players that are looking at, maybe I'd like to go to Detroit if he weren't there. And then again, you have another side of players who say, yeah, he's abrasive and he's a demanding coach, but he gets the best out of his players and he knows how to win at this level. And when it's all said and done, that's what I want to do. I want to win. I want to win a Stanley Cup.
Well, when I think of Mike Babcock, I think of this Broadway play that I saw years and years ago that had a song called "Everyone Hates Their Parents and Now You Hate Yours Too," and I think of that because Mike Babcock is difficult to play for. He's very demanding, and and he is that tough love, fatherly figure that when you're a teenager you rebel against, and I think. The Red Wing players have not. It hasn't been all rainbows and butterflies for them when they're playing for Mike Babcock. He calls them out. He's confrontational. But around the league, it's a very, very different reputation. I had a long chat with Sidney Crosby in Pittsburgh. Did a long story on him. Spent almost 2 hours with him. And he and I had a long talk about Babcock. He has great respect for Babcock. He enjoyed playing for him. Now, he saw him over a short period of time. Ryan Getzlaf, as just thinks the world of Babcock. Has had him in Team Canada. The Team Canada players. They swear by him. They love his, his level of organization. They love his preparation. But these are all premium players, and it's a very complicated situation. But I think for the most part. I don't believe for a minute that players don't come to Detroit because of Babcock. I think people know that he can be hard to play for, but I don't think guys are afraid of him. You'll never be able to convince me of that because there's too many elite level players who have great respect for him.
It seems, and again, I'm reading into this too, that and Babcock's been here 10 years now, and I know that he, with some of the veteran players. I don't know if they begin to accept him or because they're getting older, they might understand the method to his madness. It kind of reminds you talking about that Broadway song, an old joke. Bill Maher, when he was just strictly a comedian, told for his 30th birthday his parents wanted to give him a party. And, he's thinking, I don't really want a party, but, it's his parents and, they're getting older. So he has this party and he says he's at the party. He's sitting in the living room watching the TV news with his dad. And some young kid comes on and is complaining about something. And his dad starts yelling at the TV, and Bill Maher starts yelling at the TV, and they're both yelling at this kid, and Maher says, I stop, I look at my dad, I look at the kid on the screen, and I realize that guy, my dad isn't getting any cooler. You know what I mean? And turning into him, he's kind of turning into his dad, and I think that, I don't know if it's begrudgingly, because there have been some problems in the room. You know, you hear a lot of things that Red Wing players are not thrilled with Babcock, yet the last couple of years, I think Babcock has kind of toned it down a bit, and I think the veteran players have learned to accept that, meaning, in a strange sense, they're all kind of maturing and accepting one another, which I find another factor of why I think he may stay, because I don't know if he's getting the same resistance in the room that was prevalent at one time. Now, I might be reading way too much into this, because you know me, Kevin, I love to speculate and come up with all kinds of theories abound in my head, but I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is that I've seen a calmer side of Mike Babcock the last few years here in Detroit, and I've also seen veteran players who at one time might have not been thrilled with him, at least being able to tolerate him.
Yeah, no, I think that assessment is right on. I remember talking to a couple of the Red Wing players and trying to get a grasp on what Mike's style was like. And, you know, I asked for examples of the good and the bad with regard to Mike Babcock. I now have a dog in my face here.
That's all right.
And the good was, if you play in his top two lines, he lets you, he leaves you alone. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, he doesn't try to tell you how to play offensively. You know, Datsuk and Zetterberg and who's ever on the top two lines. But if you're on the third and fourth line, your soul belongs to him. You know, he's very specific on how he wants the third and fourth lines to be playing. And you know, and the other negative is that, you know, he's not like Scotty Bowman. I mean, Scotty Bowman was tough on players too, but he manipulated players through you know, ice time. And he wasn't a guy that would haul you in the office and yell at you. Well, I think Babcock is a little more confrontational. Like, you know, he is a guy that will be direct to you where, you know, I've had players say to me, you know, I never spoke with Scotty Bowman. You know, he never really talked to me, you know. Well, Mike Babcock does talk to his players. So when you're in his doghouse, you know it. So I think that's a little bit more. But I think where they're similar is Scotty Bowman evolved with the times, and I think Babcock has evolved as well, just as you said.
Well, yeah. I agree with that. You know, again, getting back to Scotty real quickly is, you know, a couple of times is that, you know, Nick Lidstrom will tell you he never talked to me.
Yeah.
He didn't need to talk to Nick. He just kind of let Nick go. Brendan Shanahan, on the other hand, he talked to Brendan Shanahan a lot, but I've always liked Brendan's response was people would say, well, you and Scotty don't get along or you don't like each other. He goes, well, you know, we might have a bit of a cantankerous relationship, but yet I'm out there at the end of the game. He's got me on the first power play unit. So, you know, if he loved me and didn't play me, I'd much rather have him, you know, be a little upset with me but still use me, you know. And I think that's kind of you know, what we're seeing. I think some people, and you're right, because of his abrasive style, he is a little bit more confrontational. And I think when he was here at the Red Wings, and where I think he is less confrontational, is that he used to call players out right on the ice in front of everybody.
Right.
And you know that is not a good thing to do. You know, players don't mind if you're going to chew them out. You know, you do it one-on-one. You don't show anybody up in front of their teammates. I think that he had to grow into that position, and I think that's less and less what's going on right now. But, hey, you know, we all grow, right? We all evolve, no matter what our ages are. We don't have all the answers, and I give Babcock credit for knowing he's still high-strung. He's still his own biggest fan, I'll say, and I mean that in a good way. I mean, he's ego-driven, yet I think he understands the parameters, and I think that he knows that it's a lot easier to get the most out of a player if you kind of work with them at times to constantly be in opposition against them.
Yeah, and I also think that what the players respect for sure is that he does his best work in crisis situations. And you know, when the Red Wings you know, had their JV squad going last season, like, he was outstanding. You know, no one can pull the levers like he can when he's, you know, outgunned and outmanned. You know, he just seems to, you know, the worse the Red Wing team is, the better job he seems to do. You know, that's one of his strengths, is that he can figure out a way to make almost any team competitive in some way, shape, or form. And you know, and I think the players appreciate that no matter what happens, Babcock is going to make sure that we're in a position to give us our best chance.
And when you look at it, I don't know, and it's interesting because I know we've talked on actually the first Red and White Authority about its future, and tomorrow the Red Wings are going to be in Philadelphia, and I know that we've speculated a little bit that everyone's thinking that Toronto might be his final destination. So I'm kind of wondering, do you think that tomorrow there will be not so veiled attempts to maybe make Mr. Babcock feel welcome in the city of brotherly love?
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I mean, I think it's just been speculated because, Ed Snyder, similar to Mr. Ilitch here in Detroit, a guy that's been an owner for a very long time, a little older, would like to win now, just as Mr. I would. I think everyone believes that Berube will be fired, and, Snyder has the ability to go out and buy what he needs. So it'll be interesting to see if that's what he'll do. I don't know what his Mike Babcock's relationship is with Ron Hextall or Paul Holmgren, or if he has any. But it'll be interesting. Always there's something that you didn't count on in these situations.
Right.
And some people have speculated that maybe it'll be Anaheim, where he was before, where he seemed to enjoy himself. The Samuelis have a lot of money out there, and everyone believes that Bruce Boudreau's on a hot seat if they don't perform well in the playoffs. And there's kind of a read on Boudreau, and I really like the guy a lot. And I know players like playing for him. He's a fun guy. He's a lovable guy. Everybody remembers the HBO 24/7.
He's very eloquent in his speech.
Yes, he is. Yes. He is but he's very well liked. Like, the players really like playing for him. They want to compete for him. But I think people wonder about whether or not he's too old school. Is he sophisticated enough? Like, coaching is a very, very sophisticated profession now. It's a 12-hour job. You come in the morning and you're breaking down film, and it's not come in 2 or 3 hours and call it a day. They do a lot of work in breaking down the film. And I was just reading a story about Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, where he's basically they're going 12 and 14 hours a day. They don't have time to go out. Like Jim Harbaugh, I read the story. It just said Jim Harbaugh hasn't even had time to buy a car here or anything else, because he's like, well, that's the way it is in the NHL too. I mean, these guys come in every morning. They're breaking down films. They stay late. They figure out ways to try to take advantage of the other team. So Bruce Boudreau, some people wonder whether or not he's sophisticated enough for the modern game, that maybe it's not enough to be sort of the motivator that he is. And if that's the case, and he gets fired, then I think people think that the Samuelis will perhaps look at Mike Babcock.
We talked about this, but for people that may have missed the episode about money, that there is speculation that Babcock could command $5 million a year. Would the Red Wings go that high, or because they think so highly not only of Jeff Blashill, but they really like Tony Granato as well, like to keep him a little bit in the fold, and that maybe a coaching tandem, not that I think Blashill would be the head coach, but Granato would be, they have a habit of paying assistants top end money, like they're a head coach in a way, at least monetarily, that the Red Wings, because of Blashill and the success, and let's be honest, Grand Rapids, if Grand Rapids were an NHL team, they'd be quite a story, because talk about injuries. I mean, virtually all the whole team's playing up here in Detroit at one time or another, and all they're doing is winning games. But that because Blashill is such a good insurance policy, and even though Detroit likes to spend money and has no qualms about spending it, that they would, if somebody goes to that $5 million mark, that they would draw the line there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's so hard because, as we've talked before, there's the Prince Fielder rule here, which is that Mike Ilitch will do whatever it takes to get whoever he wants. And
right.
We've seen that in action. But is there a point where Mr. Ilitch becomes offended? I guess that's always my take on it. Like, where he says, now you're just, holding me up.
Right.
Like I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Like, I don't know what his relationship is. I'm reasonably confident that he thinks Mike Babcock is a great coach. I know Ken Holland feels that way. I know that they will offer him a lucrative deal, and I'm sure it will not be an insulting deal. But at some point, I mean, there has to be a line even for Mike Ilitch. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And again, because they have Blashill there, because they have Tony Granato, who could be an associate coach, does that mean that line is moved a little farther away from $5 million than it would be if they didn't have any options? Maybe.
Do you think that there are going to be at least one team, if not teams, that will approach Babcock and offer him $5 million a season?
Well, I would think the Maple Leafs would, but I believe he's going to sign before then. I do. I think he likes it here. I think he likes these players. This has become home. There's something to be said for piling up wins with one franchise. To me, the Toronto Maple Leafs are not an attractive team. They're going to be just a terrible team. Even in a stripped down team like the Maple Leafs are going to be, you've got the cadre issue to deal with as well. Like, even if they decide to keep him, is he going to mature out of the issues he's had there? So I don't see that as, and I don't think Mike Babcock would enjoy the give and take with the Toronto media. I've seen him in action. He can do it. He's certainly capable of handling that. But why would he want to?
82 games is a long time.
Well, and it's people say the challenge. Well, coaching every team is a challenge.
Right.
So why go to one where to one where you're going to have more headaches than you'll have here? There's no doubt about it. And Anaheim just. I look at that market and I say it's still not a hockey town. This is a great hockey market. This is as good as it gets. Like if Canada is the ultimate hockey market because you're the biggest sport in the city and it's exciting and everything else. But this is real close. There's great respect for what the Red Wings are accomplishing in Detroit. So you have the kind of the Original Six atmosphere, you have a hockey environment, but you don't have all the headaches. You're not the number one team in town. You don't have the same media coverage that you have in Toronto and Montreal. There's so many pluses. You're going to get a new arena here, which there'll be more amenities for your players. Like I'm sure it'll look like the modern dressing rooms around here and the coaches' offices and you have, as you mentioned before, owners who treat you well. So there's so many reasons to stay. And if you go to I think Philadelphia could be a bit of a lure because they're as close to an Original Six team as you can get as well. But I think the media is a little tougher in Philadelphia. I don't think it's as bad as it is in Toronto or Montreal. But and I just don't. I think that team. They've got some good players in Giroux and and other players, but it's just not as good as the Red Wings team.
No, I always think that Philly seems to get the benefit of the doubt. We always hear great things about the Flyers, but when it's all said and done, they usually don't measure up. But again, that's my own personal view on that. It's fascinating. We'll see how it turns out. We didn't plan on having a huge Mike Babcock discussion today, but it's always good to speculate on Bab's future. What I really wanted to get to, Kevin, and I know we only have about 10 to 15 minutes left here, but Mike Milbury said something that I thought was, especially for Mike Milbury, really, really an astute comment. And that was over the telecast between Boston and the Red Wings, asking why are the Red Wings so successful in the draft? And he said intelligence. And I think that's what it is. I mean, that's what they look at a player. You and I have discussed this. I've said this repeatedly. I know you've written about it. I've talked about it at nauseum on the radio, that Detroit looks for players that understand and are able to think the game, have that hockey sense. It almost doesn't matter what position you play or how big or small you are. If you can think the game, that's what the Red Wings want.
Yeah, there's no question, and that really goes back even to the Devellano era. Hockey IQ. It's talked about a lot in the Detroit organization, and really, I mean, if we can, the Dylan Larkin pick really kind of symbolizes that.
Right,
You know,
right.
Dylan Larkin is a guy who, when you talk to scouts about him, that what they talk about is, knows what to do both offensively and defensively, knows where he should be. He's a leader. He does everything well. Henrik Zetterberg again, a guy with just unbelievable hockey IQ, like just always has a sense for what needs to be done. And going back even to Steve Yzerman, like a lot has been made about the fact that Scotty Bowman converted Steve Yzerman to being a two-way player. But, Yzerman had to want to do that. He had to know how to do that. And when he did do that, like he was a dominant player as a two-way player. Like, it wasn't like, he did it and, he was a little better, or the Red Wings were a little better for it. Like, he became one of the best all-around players in the game when he did that. So, and their scouts all sort of understand that, particularly Håkan Andersson in Sweden, who, all the Swedes that have come over here all seem to have that about them. Look at Nick Lidstrom. What did we say about him for so many years? Like, he's just such a smart player. He was so shrewd. Like, when the game, he had that little hold move that he used for years and years, and then they changed the game, and everybody was worried. There were people within the Red Wings organization that were worried that Lidstrom was not going to be as effective because he had learned to legally hold players up. But he figured out a way to do it just because he's a smart player. Well, the Red Wings are just have a long history of having a number of players like that.
Right. Nick, I can remember that, and you know this. Sidney Crosby, after his rookie season, they said, "What was the surprise, the biggest surprise that you had in the league?" And he said, "How good Nick Lidstrom is, how he controls a game." I never really realized that till I played against him. It was phenomenal. And I always love players saying that they would go into the Red Wing zone, they're carrying the puck, and they're making a move onto the net, and they're going up against Nick, and they don't feel anything. He doesn't really check them, and they're thinking, okay, and they're about to take a shot, and then they realize they don't have the puck anymore. He's taken it and has passed it up ice. The Red Wings have an odd man rush. I mean, really, what a great player! What a great player he was. But I think you're absolutely right. When you look at all the players that the Red Wings have drafted, and they've drafted quite a few, they all were able to adapt to any given situation. And not only does that speak to the talent that they have and the desire that they have to win, but it also speaks to the brain power they have where they're able to figure it out.
Yeah, no, that's right. And, hockey IQ is, it's hard to define, but it's really just a sense of knowing what to do within the context of the game, and and it's sometimes it's not easy to know. There's a lot more reading that goes into the game than people realize. When you watch an NFL game that a quarterback is audibilizing, he's reading the defense. He's looking at several different options. But hockey players have to do that as well, and they do that as a matter of course, where they're coming down with the puck and they've got to read the situation, whether the way they should drop the pass, leave it for a defenseman coming up, whether they should carry the puck in, whether they should dump it in. There's a lot of reads that goes into the the course of a game, and the Red Wings have guys who seem to know what to do, and they've made it a habit of drafting those guys. Like the grind line is known for for playing aggressive style and in your face, being hard to play against. Darren McCarty tells just great stories of being in battles with opponents, saying, why are you defending Maltby and Draper? We hate those guys. They're bad human beings. And he goes, well, maybe they are bad human beings, but they're my bad human beings. That kind of thing. And But when you think back of that line, those who watched it, what made it so successful is they were all just smart players. Like, Chris Draper was one of the smartest defensive centers in the league. Like, he knew what to do to get under players' skin. He knew, when to take off offensively. He knew when to concentrate on defense. McCarty was the same way. He knew when to be offensive. He knew when to be defensive. He knew when it was time to take a penalty. He knew when it was time to defend. I mean, they had instincts that were really hard to define, but when you watch them all the time, you realize they were very smart players.
Yeah, and I look at this Red Wing team now, and obviously they seem to have smarts. And Kevin, how about everyone now is into advanced statistics? The sabermetric crowd in Major League Baseball, hockey's going to start adapting them. Do you think that I'm not sure exactly where you stand on advanced statistics, but will that change the draft philosophy of other teams? Because maybe, in a strange sense, maybe it wasn't advanced statistics, but the Red Wings have kind of been doing that all along, breaking it down a little bit more to be able to find out what a player's hockey IQ is.
Well, yeah. I mean, newsflash, a puck possession is important. Well, guess what? I think the Red Wings have known that for 30 years. That if you got the puck more than the other team,
right?
You do real well. I mean, Scotty Bowman was into advanced statistics, years ago, but he didn't call them advanced statistics. I remember having conversations in the 80s with Scotty Bowman about how his thinking that power play should not be measured on, because some power plays are 40 seconds and some are 2 minutes. He thought the power play breakdowns in the league stats should be number of goals per minute, because sometimes you'd get a power play that was 15 seconds long because somebody cut into it, and then you'd miss on that and you were 0 for 1. So he preferred it to say, okay, you break it down into 2-minute increments and you have 1 goal for every whatever, and that's the way he viewed things. Well, my idea about these advanced stats is they've been around the game for a long time. We just haven't talked about them, and I don't think they're I think they can be illuminating, but I think it's just another element that you look at. And all you have to do is look at baseball to see where we're going on this. Some of them will stick, and some of them won't. And just like the quality start in baseball, that's now a standard. But that stat really isn't all that old, and not everybody loves that stat. I don't love that stat. I mean, to me that's a 4.5 ERA. Well, I understand what you're thinking. If you can get your pitcher to go, for an extended period, and he only gives up 3 runs, but it doesn't say much. But sometimes I hear a couple that I really like. Like, someone has figured out that if a goalie has a .917 save percentage in a game, that's a pretty good game. He's had a pretty good game, and they've started to measure that. And to me, that makes sense. Like, I don't know why it does, but it does. I think, okay, if you the number of games you have at .917 or better, that probably is a quality start, because we know what the league average is for save percentage and so forth. So some of them make sense, and sometimes they can be illuminating. Like at the start of this season, I saw on TSN, and I'm sure a lot of the Wings fans saw this too, where a guy pointed out that Jimmy Howard has a really good 5-on-5 save percentage, and he had a good shorthanded save percentage, even better than Jonathan Quick. Now, that doesn't mean that Jimmy Howard is better than Jonathan Quick, but it does make you think a little bit, and that's what I like about some of these statistics. It just makes you think. I think in comparison of third and fourth liners, it's helpful. But here's what I always bring up. In all, some of this puck possession stats are all based on shot attempts, and sometimes, as I just alluded to, it's not your best option to shoot the puck. But in these stats, it's if you shoot the puck, it's always a good thing. So, and often it isn't. So there you go.
Well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it plays out. I mean, I do find it kind of interesting now that we're having these debates, as you know, as everyone's trying to break down everything in searching for answers, and sometimes, regardless, it's the intangibles that you don't foresee that really affect the outcome of a game. Kevin, big weekend series for the Red Wings. But before we end, and we'll probably do this again on Tuesday after Detroit may have Monday off. We'll see what happens in practice and how the weekend goes leading up to the big back-to-back games in the state of Florida next week. But I want to get into a little bit of college hockey. There's a big hockey series coming up this weekend between Michigan and Michigan State. Our good friend, Tom Anastas, who's the head coach of Michigan State, and a guy that we both know and I have an enormous amount of respect for, as you do too, Red Berenson, the head coach at Michigan. Even though I graduated from Michigan, I'm always torn about this game, but I think as I tell Tom, may the best team win. I think my heart always kind of still goes on the Michigan side, but a lot of rumors about Tom Anastas and what his future might be at Michigan State. Michigan State is in first place in the Big Ten hockey, which I guess just goes to show you I'm happy for Tom Anastas. And I guess I just wanted to say that. I'm glad that they're playing for something. If they beat Michigan tonight, this is on Friday at Munn Ice Arena, they win the Big Ten title. They are the Big Ten regular season hockey champions and the #1 seed at the Big Ten tournament next weekend at Joe Louis Arena. So phenomenal. So there's a lot of good hockey. Red Wings are playing some big games. But don't forget about the college side, especially with Michigan and Michigan State.
Yeah, and obviously Red Wing fans will be interested in that game because Dylan Larkin be playing for Michigan, and not a lot of people were predicting Michigan State was going to win the Big Ten regular season title. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that game, and I think I don't know enough about it to make a prediction, but I'm pretty sure, knowing Tom Anastas the way that I do, that his team will be ready for that game tonight.
Oh, yeah, they'll definitely be ready. Well, they play great defense. They have a great Jake Hildebrand, great goalie. And then you have the other side. Michigan scores goals. It's almost the point-a-minute goal-a-minute team. But, the goalies are having some trouble. And it's, they're polar opposites, I guess is what I'm saying. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Kevin, it's always a pleasure. Really look forward to our next show. I'm eager to see how the Red Wings are going to turn this around. I don't know if there's a magic elixir, but it sure sounded last night that they were searching for some sort of elixir. So,
well, one thing we can take note of about the Red Wings, and for the last decade or more, is whenever they have had challenges, they've risen up, and they'll be in weekend games, national television games this weekend. They're coming out of a slump. I would expect they're going to, pick it up, and they know the spotlight will be on them. And one thing I did want to bring up, I'm actually going to be down in Florida for the GM meetings next week, and then I'm going to go to Tampa and do a story on Yzerman's Lightning. But I also happen to be there by coincidence for when the Red Wings are playing in Tampa. So I'll give you a first-hand report on that one.
Well, that sounds great. I'm looking forward to that, and it should be fun. And Kevin, you take care of yourself. Thanks, and we'll see everybody. For Kevin Allen, I'm Art Regner. This is the Red and White Authority. We'll see you next week. Have a safe and pleasant weekend, everyone. See you. So long. Bye-bye.